and welcome to my next NAP. NAP stands for Nonprofit Auditor Points, and I'm Irina Urshkova, your nonprofit auditor. I created this video just for nonprofit community management and board and finance folks to discuss some accounting and finance related matters. It's not authoritative video. I am simply sharing my experience as a nonprofit auditor. And today I want to talk about timeliness of monthly and annual closing. As an auditor, we always see significant delays in closing books. And I want to talk about it, why it matters, why nonprofits should pay attention when your books are closed. Because it's not only compliance and audit readiness, it's for management oversight, for strategic planning, and for overall organization sustainability. The books needs to be closed in a reasonable time. So let's talk about it. Monthly and annual closing, it's more just reconciling numbers. When a nonprofit struggles to deliver annual close, it's actually indicator for much more problems that nonprofits might facing. If nonprofit cannot close books on time, nonprofit will have challenges with the compliance and reporting, meaning audits may be done late, tax filing might be done late, grant reports might not be submitted on time, and nonprofit might miss some application for grants timelines, deadlines, financial statements not available for the management and the board to review and react on time, and just current financial data is not important or not available for management and the board to make any decisions. We as auditors very often see that board cannot make important decisions because they're lacking financial information based on which they can and should make a decision about applying to a grant or start operating a new program. They cannot come up with a good budget. They cannot come up with a spending or strategic planning, and therefore there is significant delay in responding to various financial risks. Or sometimes board, even worse, can make a decision just based on incorrect data, very outdated data, or just information that's how much money we have in our bank. It means that we can afford it, without knowing that there is substantial liability behind this cash. Donor and funder accountability. Donors very often put specific requirements that nonprofits needs to submit some reports, and they expect accountability. If nonprofit jeopardize that timeline to provide such information, donors can actually stop funding, or they can delay money that nonprofit can use for necessities such as payroll and paying vendors. And that creates instability and potential losing a donor. If nonprofit really struggles to produce financial statement on time, very often it's indication of operational health, meaning that nonprofit does not have a proper policy procedures, nonprofit lacking of adequate staffing, and nonprofit does not believe that creating internal accountability is critical. They're very concentrating in the program activities, but if nonprofit does not have a good bone structure of the administrative and management, that eventually will hurt nonprofit. So now let's talk about what is reasonable timeline to close month and year. So first of all, we as the auditors, we work with nonprofits at the end of the year and we see the struggle. And we always know that if nonprofit has a good month close procedure, they should not have difficulty to close the year. So if we see significant delay in the annual close, it means that it was throughout the year, at least for 12 months. It's enough time for management to react and change something. So, and if such delay consistent throughout the year, it means that there is some communication intent, tone from the top of the management that does not gets heard or implemented, and nonprofit does not change anything in their policies and procedures to make sure that they fix it. But reasonable time to close books, which is very sufficient, 2 or 3 months. If your nonprofit cannot close books in 3 months, your nonprofit needs to consider what is not properly set up and function. Well-run organization typically should close a year or months within 30 days. Up to 30 days, it's very sufficient. If something unusual happened, it can take up to 2, we even think it might be 3 months. But beyond that, it's really not reasonable. So we as the auditors, if it takes more than 3 months to close books, we always get concerned when we start doing audit. And we raise the red flags, thinking maybe there is not good document retention policy, disorganized record keeping, understaffed personnel. Maybe the accounting department or outsourced bookkeepers are overbooked and don't have sufficient time for our nonprofit. Most likely there is weak internal control or excessive backlog of documents, meaning that the organization does not record some invoices and grants throughout the year and do it rushly at the end of the year. Consequences of the not having a good system that allows nonprofit close their books timely could be quite significant. If nonprofit does not have a good, timely financial statements, nonprofit can run into cash flow risks unexpectedly because they don't control the expenses well enough. They don't understand how much revenue they bring in. They don't understand their profitability or profitability of each program that they're running. They cannot prepare a budget to actual analysis on a timely basis. And therefore, nonprofit cannot simply do any strategic planning. At the end of the day, board of directors cannot make any strategic decisions for their nonprofit to grow, not to grow, or what they need to do timely. So ideally, nonprofit should be able to produce clear and timely information to the board and the management so they can make the decisions for the nonprofit. And these reports should include quarterly reports, reconciliations, monthly statement, including balance sheet and income statement, cash flow update, grant compliances, reimbursement schedule, and any information that funders required. All of these can be produced if accounting and finance department close books within reasonable time, in which is monthly should be about 30 to 60 days. What happens, what potential issues can arrive in nonprofit does not close books timely? A nonprofit can face late filings, some penalties. Sometimes we do see that nonprofit can even completely forget filing, and that can cause to nonprofit to be the exempt status to taken away, meaning that the nonprofit cannot even solicit funds and continue operation. It can also lead to poor ratings on a public database, which can lead to donors to stop trusting that nonprofit and not even donating. And overall public trust can be hurt, which is very difficult to rebuild. Additionally, if nonprofit will require an audit, it can take longer if the documents not available or significantly delayed. It can cause any significant deficiencies, which a lot of times are very hard to hear. It can cause serious concern among board members, and some board members simply can decide not to be associated with a nonprofit and they can resign. And overall, for a nonprofit that does not have a good policy and procedures regarding their finance, monthly and annual close, it can be inherently difficult to find a good board member or even hire employees, because nobody wants to be hired into challenging situation. Transparency and good documents, good monthly closing process is a key base for any employee who comes on board to know that they're going to be part of something organized and they can concentrate on the mission. Just to summarize, if nonprofit cannot close its books or within 3 months and it takes longer, up to 6 months, it's a big red flag. We can almost with certainty to conclude that the organization has a very weak internal control, needs to be revisited, needs to be understood, and there is absolutely required new system of internal control that will include document procedures, timely reconciliation, segregation of duties, review process, and overall oversight by everybody involved in the process. Insufficient staffing. Insufficient staffing can be hard to address because there's always not enough finance available to staff nonprofit adequately. However, the nonprofit should not only concentrate on the mission and the growth, but before nonprofit growth, it's supposed to ensure that it has enough infrastructure, that infrastructure will be able to absorb future growth of nonprofit. So before you grow, you need to make sure that you have enough admin staffing to sustain that operational growth. Management and board need to make sure that accounting and finance department record invoices, contracts, billing, grant letters timely. There is no backlog. There is no we will do it later. There is no we reconcile it later. Bank statements needs to be reconciled monthly. Accounts receivable needs to be reviewed monthly. Accounts payable needs to be reviewed monthly. Ideally, net assets with and without donor restrictions needs to be updated monthly. So board again and management can see how much funds they have restricted and what they're restricted for, what purpose or time, and see how much cash they have, so if it's cash available for operation use or not. Simply having cash in a bank does not mean that nonprofit has operating cash for whatever purposes they need. In order to make sure that everybody on the same page and everybody within the organization know when the information will be available, it's highly recommended for nonprofit to develop a calendar for every parties involved who is going to deliver closing for accounts receivable, accounts payable, bank reconciliations, credit card reconciliations, and finally, when the accounting department will be able to deliver statements to the board for the review. Also, nonprofits needs to make sure that necessary software is used and used correctly. There is segregation of duties in place, so not just the accounting department close the books and nobody looks at them. They need to be reviewed and approved. All of that will help nonprofit to make sure, first of all, that they are operational, gonna continue operate, and they're not facing risk of running out of cash or spending cash not for the purposes that it's needed to be spent. The donors restrictions are obeyed, requirements. The donor reporting requirements are done on time. That IRS filing and state filing and any other government agency filing done on time. There is no penalties, fees that nonprofit will incur. That audit is done smoothly, timely. At the end of the day, nonprofit organizations are required to be transparent, run efficiently, because they're funded by public, and public require accountability. And for that, nonprofit is required to have a good internal controls around their monthly and annual close, so they can be transparent and responsible for public funds. Thank you so much. Thank you for being here with me. Be safe and have a wonderful day.